Today we continue our Lenten sermon series on the 7 last sayings of Jesus from the cross with a reading from the Gospel of John. Just prior to this, 4 Roman soldiers have stripped him, nailed him to the cross. They've cast lots for his outer garments. And then there are others standing by. Listen to what Jesus says to them and to us. And I think the soundtrack we just heard fits perfectly. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. A couple of years ago, Carla and I, along with Donna, who's a docent at the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, we took a group, some of you, to Italy for the Bible and Art Tour. Donna and I have been doing these Bible and Art tours at the Nelson for years. We still do them occasionally, but we decided we need to take it to Rome, to Florence, and that's what we did. In Rome, we naturally went to the Sistine Chapel, where I'm pretty sure I could sit for hours just looking at that ceiling. And then when you step out into the sunlight, if you take a right, you're in St. Peter's Basilica, and as soon as you enter, of course, you're blown away by the grandeur of it all, but just off to the right is Michelangelo's sculpture, the Pietà. If you don't know, it's a marble sculpture of Mary holding the dead body of Jesus across her lap. And it is so powerful. I'm pretty sure Donna would note things like how Michelangelo claimed it was the best piece of marble he ever used, or maybe even the kind of debate or controversy over the size of Mary in proportion to her son and her age. But I would point to one thing: the title, Pietà, Italian word for pity. Mary has pity on her dead son, and we who look at this piece feel pity for Mary, who has watched him die. In this story in the Gospel of John, Jesus is not yet dead. He is this close, but he is not yet dead. Standing close by is his mother and this other disciple. And seeing them, he turns to his mother and says, Here is your son. And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that moment on, he took her into his own home. It is a powerful scene. You could name it Pietà. It is beautiful and lovely, and, well, scholars note, though, it's not just, like a Hallmark moment. It's not the first Mother's Day. There's something else going on here than just concern for his mother's well-being, of course. And that larger thing, here's how I would put it. On Monday nights, I'm currently teaching a class here looking at the 4 Gospels. We met once, we've got 3 more to go. You're welcome to come. Each week we look at one Gospel. And the first week, and I know that I'll say it again, when you read the Gospels, you have to remember you are 1 to 2 generations after the time of Jesus. In the case of John, 60, 70 years later. And so when John tells you a story about Jesus, he's not trying to take you back there. This is what Jesus did on a Tuesday, or here's a Friday story. He's telling these ancient stories to say a word to his church. And I think the word he says here is that what Jesus says with his dying breath is what he tried to accomplish his entire life. He wanted to form the beloved community, the thing we now call church. And that's what I think he's doing. It may well be that it's never been harder than now. And I know that's a little presumptuous, but I'm thinking about this 5-year anniversary of COVID. Some of you have probably been reading what I've been reading. And I'm thinking not just in terms of what it did to us in terms of health, people sick and dying, and not just education, children trying to do school online, parents trying to work and do school online with their kids. I'm thinking more about what it's done to us socially, culturally, and in the church. Derek Thompson, who is a journalist with The Atlantic, has written a beautiful piece just a couple of weeks ago in which he says, you know that pandemic they talked about of isolation and loneliness? Well, he said that loneliness epidemic may have been exaggerated. It's not so much loneliness as maybe the bigger culprit is intentional social isolation. I don't know if you've seen them. I Googled it really quickly. But on all kinds of social media platforms, you can see these memes and videos under the heading of canceled plans. Have you heard of this? You look at the video, and here's a person on their phone. They've got it on the speaker, and a friend has called to say, hey, I'm really sorry. I know we were supposed to get drinks tonight or meet for dinner, but I'm not going to make it. And the person says, oh, man, that's too bad. But silently, they're going, yes, 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 I can stay home. Because staying home means I'll order what I want on Grubhub and eat by myself, and I'll binge what I want on Netflix and I'll watch by myself. You know that phrase, remote work. Thompson and others are writing about remote life. We practiced it during COVID and it carried over. So I remember it 5 years ago when the church on a Tuesday said, we're not meeting. We're not meeting this Sunday or for the foreseeable future. And we scrambled around to try and figure out how do you broadcast worship. We didn't have any experience with that. Thankfully, not too long after that, we hired Dan Warnicki and his crew who knew how to do this broadcast. And it is, well, I mean, they should be nominated for an Academy Award. Best mainline Protestant worship service broadcast by, I mean, they should get the Oscar. And it's brilliant because, let's face it, there are people who are sick and can't get here. There are people who no longer drive. There are people in St. Louis and Des Moines who worship with us and are right now. But the thing about cultural shifts, and COVID was a major one, is there are always unintended consequences. You know, like, well, I'm not really sick, and yeah, I still drive, but it is kind of raining outside. Maybe we'll just watch online today. And I say that not to bring a guilt trip, to make someone feel bad, but to encourage us to be present because we need each other. I had always thought, maybe you had too, that the Amish were anti-tech. Turns out that's not true. Last summer when they were building the house next to us, they framed it with an Amish crew, and they had a pneumatic nailer. They were just nailing that thing. And I thought, haven't they ever heard of hammers? I mean, come on. But the Amish, it turns out, they take tech one thing at a time to decide yes or no, risk or reward. What if we rethought this streaming thing? Nobody stays home from work when it's raining. What if we were to commit to being with each other? And the reason I say that is because of something in this text. In this translation, the one you have in your pew Bibles, most modern translations, Jesus says, here's your mother, here's your son. Turns out, this is one of those rare times when the King James got it better, got it right. The King James says, behold your mother. Behold your son. And it doesn't just mean, well look, there they are. It's the language of a decree. It's kind of like when a minister stands up here and says, I now pronounce you. There is this moment of pronouncement that something happens. In this case, it's a royal decree because in the Gospel of John, Jesus goes to the cross as a king. They put a crown on him and they say, the King of the Jews. And here is his royal edict. Behold your mother, behold your son. It is an edict of adoption. And from that moment on, he takes her into his own home. In the other Gospels, doesn't happen like this, but in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, you're my friends. The beloved community is a place of friendship. So when I met with the pastor's class a week and a half ago, all those sixth graders went on a field trip. We came, we talked about the table, and we talked about baptism. And I told them a story. And I said, I want to tell you a story, and you tell me what you think. And I told them how years ago I happened to be in a church. I was the preacher for the day, but there was this group getting baptized, their pastor's class. And the person who was dunking the kids in the water said, this is Jeremy, and if you're Jeremy's family or friends, if you'll stand, dunk Jeremy, thank you. This is Brittany, if you'll stand, you're Brittany's family or friends. Went through it, and I said, so what do you think? And the kids were all like, yes. And I go, yeah, maybe not. I said, I think it's almost a really good idea. I said, the problem is everybody in the church is their family and friends. Everybody should be standing. That's why Jesus calls disciples friends. But here's where it gets more interesting, because it's not just that we come to be around others, it's that we come to be around people of different generations. And that is so rare in our society. Church is one of the few places where it happens. Kids don't play soccer with somebody 10 years older or 20 years older. And most of us hang out in our age groups, but not in the church. So some of you know, last fall I taught a course at William Jewell College called A Life Worth Living. We wrestled with what's the meaning of life and all kinds of questions like, what's my obligation to myself, to others? What am I going to do for a living? What are my values? All these questions. Well, first day of class, we're making our way through the syllabus. Their eyes are getting big. Oh my gosh, I got to write a paper and another paper. But buried in the middle of those assignments was this one. Every student in the class will be assigned a conversation partner, an older person in the Kansas City community that you will meet with once a week for coffee and conversation. And a lot of you in the congregation were a part of that. Some, I told the kids, are, in their 60s and 70s. Some are a little younger than that, some a little older, but that's what you're going to do. And then I said, so, we'd only met a few minutes ago, right? We're going through the syllabus. So what do you think about that? They were not impressed. And one girl spoke for the group. Well, I don't really like old people. That's what she said. Fast forward to the last day of class. I brought donuts, grades were turned in, and I said, okay, besides eating a donut, help me with how could this class be better, what worked, what didn't? What do you think? Unanimous. Best thing about this class, conversation partners. Some of them are still in touch. This is Jesus' vision for the church. It's the language of behold, your mother, your brother, your sisters, your father. I ran across a story a couple weeks ago that I had read years ago and had forgotten about, and it's so powerful. This Arab-American writer named Naomi Shihab Nye, poet, writer, she was flying from Albuquerque to El Paso, and they made an announcement, 4-hour delay. Yeah, we've all been there. You know what you do. You get a bite to eat, you go do some steps. So she's walking, and the announcement comes on. If anyone speaks Arabic, could you please come to gate A4? Well, she speaks Arabic. She's fluent in Arabic. It's her gate. It's her flight. So, she's a little bit hesitant, We haven't always been on good terms with Arabs. And so she goes, and sure enough, there is this woman, Palestinian woman, embroidered Palestinian dress, sprawled out on the floor, crying unconsolably, screaming. And the gate attendant says, I have no idea what her problem is. And Naomi puts her arm around the woman. She's still crying. But then in Arabic, she says, what can I help you with? She stops crying. Someone understands her. And she says, I have to be in El Paso for a medical procedure tomorrow, and they've canceled the flight. And she goes, no, it's delayed. You will be there tonight. Who is picking you up? Her brother. So Naomi calls her brother, and in Arabic says, the flight's been delayed, she will be there. And then, just for the heck of it, Naomi calls her dad, puts him on the phone with this woman, and in Arabic they talk. Turns out they have common friends. Well, of course, they're Palestinian. It's a small group. And then for the fun of it, Naomi puts on poet Palestinian friends that she knows, calls them up, puts them on the phone, and they just start talking to this woman. Now, the whole time this is happening, the woman who is traveling has this little bag of cookies, Palestinian cookies. They're kind of crumbly, dates and nuts and some dough, and covered with powdered sugar. And she started to offer them to people around her, and no one refuses. And then these little girls who are on the flight, they start taking them around and serving them. And everybody's covered in powdered sugar. And the airline breaks out free apple juice, and the girls are serving that, and everyone is covered in powdered sugar. And Naomi writes, "This is the world I want to live in, the shared world." And I have to agree, it's also the church I want to belong to, the shared church. So when this service is over and you go out there to get some of that bread with the peach Bellini jam or a cookie or whatever it is, and you're standing around talking to each other, just pay attention. We are not all young and nimble. We are not all old and limping. We are all over the place. Different genders, different health, different ages. But while you're looking, behold, behold.